Hi guys! So in today's video, I'm going to talk about fear of rejection. And I'm also going to talk about how awareness is a really important first step on our healing path when we're trying to work through these fearful parts of ourselves. So let's dive in. So this past weekend was a really big moment for me. I did a vendor booth for the first time. I've had my business for a number of months now, and this was something that I really was so hesitant and scared to do, right? But I was really excited about it at the same time. And, in the days leading up to it, or I should say the weeks leading up to it, I was getting everything together and, feeling really good about it, like in a good place. And then a couple weeks before the date came, I didn't notice it in the moment, but closer to the date, I began to know a sort of shift within me. And I noticed I was starting to procrastinate and I was getting more irritable. And, I just sort of had this like tension in my body that I was holding on to and, just avoiding things, right? Like if I had to be getting something ready for my booth, I was doing everything but getting the stuff ready, right? And I just went about my day. And it came to about the night before the date of the vendor booth. And I was up late sewing and I was trying to get like these last minute things together. And I just realized to myself, like, what am I doing? Like, what is going on here? And I realized I was feeling scared, right? And that fear had sort of taken the wheel of the car, so to speak, and was like driving me around these last couple weeks. And it was this fear of rejection, right? It was this old fear kind of coming up. It was being triggered by this experience of going through doing the vendor booth. And this certainly wasn't something new for me. It's something that had come up in the past for me when I have either new situations or new experiences come up. And here it was again, right? So this vendor booth was providing me an additional opportunity to sort of begin to acknowledge this and come to terms with it, right? An opportunity for healing. And so I thought today I would share some of the insights that sort of came to me on my own path with this, right? This isn't something I fully healed. I'm still working through, but perhaps some insights that I've gained as I'm going through this while they're fresh in my mind can be helpful for you if fear of rejection is something that you're working through as well, or really any type of fear. So the first thing I want to talk about is awareness. Now, when we're feeling fear in our life, it can really just it's almost like we have blinders on in the moment, right? It just engulfs everything that we're doing, and all we see is the fear, right? We see it as our reality. We see it as the only way forward, and nothing else exists in our perception, right? And it's like when I was, like I mentioned with the weeks before the vendor booth, it was like I was doing all these actions without even thinking. Like it was so unconscious, and I was just go, go, go without really stopping to be aware of what I was feeling in my body, what I was feeling emotionally. I was just in this survival mode, right? My body was in this like fight or flight sort of trigger. And awareness, when we pause to bring awareness to what's going on in our lives, especially in these stressful moments, it almost like it provides that break in the cycle that we need to begin to see that we're caught in this cycle or in this pattern or in these unconscious fear responses. One image that came to mind when I was sort of contemplating this was the visual of a sunrise. And when we're feeling fearful, it's almost like we're in like the nighttime, right? Everything's dark and we can only see but so far in front of us. And awareness, when we can bring in awareness, it's almost like that sun peeking up over the horizon, right? It shines a little bit of a light so that we can begin to see things a little bit more clearly, a little bit further away. We might see details that, oh, I didn't even know that tree was over there because I couldn't initially see it, right? And so the same goes for our own experience. When we bring awareness into it, then we might begin to notice things that we didn't see before, right? We saw just the fear, and now we can see maybe our responses and our actions and how maybe this is directing our life in a way that we don't want it to direct anymore. And when we begin to see these things, we really can't unsee them, right? So that provides the shift that we need. Even if it's a very subtle one, it makes a huge difference. It provides that shift that we need to begin to heal this and break these cycles and patterns in our life, right? So fear doesn't have so much control over everything that we're doing in our lives. And the one thing I want to say here too that I feel is really important is that awareness isn't about knowing the origin story. It's not about knowing where this comes from necessarily, right? That may come with time, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit more next. But awareness is really just bringing our attention to what we're feeling, what our actions are, and what we're feeling in our body, our emotions, and just being present with it, right? Creating space for it and just being there for ourselves and for our inner world and what's going on. So talking about the origin story, right? I think a lot of times when we recognize that we have some sort of fearful response in our life or we're feeling scared, we want to know, where does this come from, right? What caused me to have a fear of rejection in the first place? I know that that's something that I think about. It's usually one of my initial reactions. I'll talk about one of my other initial reactions in just a second. But this idea of wanting to know where it comes from, like if I can just figure out where it came from, then I can fix it, right? But the truth of the matter is that our sort of inner world is not necessarily really eager to divulge this information, right? To share this right away. A lot of times these parts, they come from a place of hurt, right? A place of trauma or a place of fear themselves. Something happened maybe when we were a child that sort of triggered this reaction in us, and it's just kind of stuck there. And to share that information is very vulnerable. Even though we're talking about ourselves, wanting to know that information about ourselves, we're the caretaker of our inner world, right? And it's our responsibility to create this sort of safe, loving environment for ourselves. And then perhaps the result of that is that we then are granted this sort of information, right? You don't just go up to a stranger and ask them their deepest, darkest secret, right? They're not going to tell you. And the same goes for us, right? We want to be that loving support for ourselves and then see what comes of it with no expectation, right? When we truly love someone, when we truly love ourselves, we are going to allow ourselves to be or experience or feel whatever wants to, be felt or experienced, and love it anyway. So awareness without expectation builds trust and safety. And that's what is going to ultimately bring about change in our life and transform these sort of fearful parts of ourselves, which can help us on our healing path. So the next thing I want to talk about is my other typical reaction, which maybe some of you might share this reaction as well. I know it's quite a common one. And that is, one of my first reactions is to say, well, how do I get rid of this? How do I make it go away? I don't want to be feeling scared. I don't want to be feeling stressed. I don't want to be feeling anxious. So how do I get rid of it? Right? And I mean, I get it. Ultimately, we want to shift from feeling scared to not feeling scared, right? That's maybe why we're on a healing path in the first place. We don't like what we're feeling. But one of the things that kind of came to my realization as I was sort of contemplating this was that feeling of wanting the feelings to go away is really no different than feeling the fear of rejection in the first place, right? They're both fear-based responses in a way, because ultimately they both want my current experience to be different than it is right now in this moment, right? So they both have the energy of fear, and fear isn't going to get rid of fear. And they also both are about rejection, right? Fear of rejection. I'm scared about getting rejected by people when I, go put myself out in the public. And then this wanting my feelings or whatever I'm experiencing inside of me to go away is essentially rejecting myself, right? Which is what I was initially scared of in the first place. So it's almost like this external fear is also being shown to me internally and experienced within me and my own emotional ecosystem. And this was a really big realization for me. So often we get caught in these cycles, and I could clearly see in this moment how even with past moments of fear and getting caught in these unconscious sort of patterns, this was always sort of my response. And it was in this moment that I could see that it was the same energy this whole time. And that's not what's going to really help to clear this for me. So what I want to share now is what was my next step, right? After I made this sort of realization in my life. And the energy, like, it's almost like I could see the cycle of the energy, like this fearful sort of movement about it. And instead of forcing the energy to like come to a screeching halt, it's almost like redirecting it, right? And I get this sort of image in my mind of like, I never did karate or taekwondo or anything like that, but I get this image in my mind of like, if somebody's going to like punch you, you don't just stop their punch, you like pull it, you see in the movies or something where they don't block it with a hard block. They sort of use the momentum of the other person's body to sort of fling them off to the side, right? Redirect them. So that's kind of the image that I got with this. And so one of the sort of things that I decided to try was to come up with a mantra. And, I didn't want just like a positive affirmation just to like try and like negate anything that was going on. Like, yes, maybe those have value and whatnot, but I really wanted this to sort of be something that embodied acceptance of what I was feeling and what I was going through, but at the same time, redirecting the energy. So it's almost like this fearful energy was in motion, and instead of going straight, I was sort of guiding it to turn to the right and showing it a different way than the one that it was currently going in. And so the mantra that I came up with was, I am free. And for me, freedom, not just freedom from fear, right? But it's freedom from fear directing my life, right? The fear is there and it can be there, right? But I'm going to be aware enough, or try to be aware enough, so that it's not making the choices for me, right? We're partners on this path in a way that, okay, you can be yourself, but this is who I really want to be, and you could come along for the ride and see what you think, right? I've been only doing this for maybe like a week or so I can't really say, long term, how is this, our healing path can kind of shift and move. It's very dynamic in that way, where we kind of shift with it, right? And, one thing I noticed as I was doing this over the week was, I get a lot of sometimes thoughts in my mind, or I sort of create scenarios of conversations or how things went. So for example, thinking back to my day of doing the vendor booth, one fear response that I have was I would recreate sort of scenarios in my head. Well, maybe I should have said this instead of that. So I create that conversation in my mind. And so anytime something like that would come up, then I would take a moment to go back to the mantra I created. I am free. I am free. And, I did notice over time that they would be less frequent, right? Those sort of, I guess you could call intrusive thoughts or fear-based imagination, whatever you want to call it. And I just overall felt a little bit calmer. And so, like I said before, this is still something I'm still working on and still working through, right? We're all walking this path together. So, my invitation to you is, if it resonates, is to create your own mantra. You don't have to use the same one that I use. This is just the one that felt right for me. And see what feels right for you. I just know that I wanted something short, easy, and quick that I could use during the day, right? If it resonates with you more to write a little thing and keep it in your pocket and read it every time, then, that's great. Do what resonates with you, because you're going to be the ultimate best authority on your own healing path. And, I also invite you just to take some time to, contemplate and bring some awareness into your life right now. See if you can notice any particular moments where maybe you're feeling fear and you've been caught in that cycle or that pattern as well. A lot of times we'll feel it in our body. If there's any areas of tension in your body, that's a good place to start. Just kind of bringing your awareness into that and seeing what comes up for you. Any moment that we can bring even a little bit of awareness into our life, it's ultimately going to bring us that freedom, right? If you do give this a try, feel free to let me know how it goes. You can either post it in the comments or you can send me an email. I'd love to hear from you. And, just remember, many small steps lead to great change in our life. So keep going, keep healing, and don't be afraid to go within. If you enjoyed today's content, please give a like and subscribe. I appreciate the support for my channel. If you want to follow along with the work that I do, you can sign up for my newsletter. I'll put the link in the description below. You can also check out my healing services on my website, thespiritwithin.com. And if you want to learn a little bit more about my own healing path, I do share a lot more of that in my monthly blog post, and that is on my website as well. I appreciate you all being here with me today, and till we see each other again. Bye, guys.